introduce the speaker here, Dr. Meigs. So you may know him as a teacher here at JCC.
Occasionally.
He's also the senior web architect for Olathe Public Schools, where he oversees services for the district. He has a doctorate in educational leadership and a master's in education as well, an emphasis in technology. He has over 15 years of experience, and he has teaching experience at Rockhurst, Mid-America Nazarene, and Baker Universities. He serves as an adjunct professor at Baker and JCC, where he teaches web design and development for web applications. And his topic today is transforming web with WordPress. He is now building each of the district's 34 elementary school websites using his latest WordPress template, and he expects to have all these sites launched between March and May of 2012.
All right, thanks, Camila. I appreciate that. Well, I do have a little bit of experience, but it might surprise you to know, and I think everybody sometimes says something that maybe not everyone knows about them, and they find it interesting. But I used to be a music teacher many, many years ago. So when I started out, I was a music teacher. Now I did have computer studies or computer science licensure in the state of Kansas, and so I had kind of an interesting journey with technology. Most of which I worked with teachers. Even when I was a music teacher, I worked with teachers and technology. And when I worked on my master's degree, I geared it toward technology because the advent of the web, and which some of you have mentioned, you're here for the very reason that you do something else, but you kind of want to get used to this because this is kind of the future of what you might be doing as far as a part-time career, or as on the side, or when you retire, or whatever it may be, or maybe it's a full-time career. But I've certainly made it into a full-time career, and I didn't really anticipate that, but the web has been good to me. So I'm excited about sharing with you WordPress today. So I'm going to do a kind of an informal survey, just a fist of 5, and 5 being the greatest or most familiar with, and 1, of course, being the least familiar with what the term open source is. So just a real quick fist of 5, if 5 being the greatest, 1 being the least, 0 if you have no familiarity, if you don't even know what open source is. Sounds like, but at any rate, so give me a fist of 5 real quick on what open source is, how your familiarity level with open source. Okay, great. So we got some variation. Some people are really used to it, and some people are maybe exploring that or getting used to it, or maybe some of you have an idea of open source. The biggest thing that people associate with open source is that it's free. And they think, wow, that's free. That's a really cool thing. Well, the other thing, though, to associate with open source is, and you can look it up, you can look various definitions, and you can Google, but there's a group or a community of developers and things out there that are developing. For instance, I could even develop, in fact, some of what you see on these themes that I've developed for a large school district in the area, that it's something where a whole community of developers can get together and create things. So WordPress is an open source tool that runs off PHP, MySQL, and of course HTML and style sheets, and it uses things like that, which you're probably familiar with. But that's what that open source tool is, and you can develop things like widgets and plugins for WordPress. You can also do that with some other tools as well. So that's just kind of a good information, a quick introduction to WordPress, so to speak. Has anybody ever heard, you can just put your hands up on this one, but has anybody ever heard of Moodle? Anybody here heard of Moodle? Okay, great. Several universities are using Moodle as opposed to other somewhat expensive tools that they use for learning management systems. So especially universities that are trying to cut costs and things like that, Moodle is a learning management system, very similar to some of the things you might see here at JCCC or other universities. So that's another open source tool that's been around. It's been gaining quite a bit of momentum, especially in education, where we seem to be hurting for funding and school funding and things like that. So there's another one that you might have heard of called Drupal. Drupal, some government organizations are using that. Businesses are using Drupal. A lot of developers are using Drupal. If you want to look on the back of the handout that I gave you, you can see some websites I've done for the school district. And if you want to just type in the very first one, at the top, type that in your web browser, and then type the new site in, and you can kind of compare those. But Drupal, the reason, as I'm telling you about this, Drupal is another content management system used for building websites. Joomla, which is also on that list that I've given you, it's down at the bottom. The new district website that we built is was built on a product called Joomla. Come on in, you're fine. But the one I want to show you, and of course I'm fairly excited about showing you today, is WordPress. And so if you type that first address where it says the old site and of the elementary school, and then you type in the new site and compare those two, all you have to really do is put buildings in between the .com and /buildings/ whatever the name of the school is. And then if you look at the new site, that new site is built in WordPress. And so, but it might also interest you to know that the district that I work for is the use of WordPress is saving us approximately 2 teacher salaries every year. So as we implement it, and as some of you were thinking, gosh, 34 websites, that sounds like a lot to be implementing in a short amount of time. But because of WordPress, because of the way I've built the WordPress theme that I've built for this website and the new website to be able to manage it, it makes it a lot easier. It's still a lot of work, and the graphics, especially the graphics, and some of you that have done graphic design know, that for each elementary school is a lot of work. But overall, the themes are not as much work. I can roll those out pretty much in a fairly rapid manner. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you. I wanted you to take a look at the old website for one of those elementary schools, and then the new website for one of those elementary schools.
What did you use for the old ones, or do you know?
Yeah, we used basically a template from a web authoring system or a web authoring tool, and it was one of those situations where you had to have the software, of course, the license in the building, and each person that maintained the website for the elementary school or the middle school and high school for that matter, they had to use that software to upload everything every time. So anytime they made changes, they'd have to do an upload and a download, and things like that. So that's the old site took considerably more hours to manage, whereas the new site, the new WordPress sites, have certainly been a lot easier to use. So good question. And so my journey with WordPress began it's been about 4 or 5 years ago when a student came up to me and said, Dr. Meigs, you need to use WordPress. You got to go to WordPress. Start building your websites in WordPress. And I thought, and myself and the other teacher that taught web at the high school, I taught for 6 years at the high school level, and he and I were like, is this going to change the way we do websites? Because we've been doing this for a while, and this is a content managed system. Now, I had built something similar about 6 or 7 years ago, a content manager for a system using PHP and MySQL for the high school website that I was teaching at the time. But at the same time, I didn't know anything about WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or any of these content managers. So I was a little bit leery of it, but I, of course, investigated it. And what I've found is, and without going into too much detail, the HTML, which of course helps you construct, it does the formatting of your web page, but then style sheets, you can apply those style sheets to the HTML and then of course build a beautiful site, really. You can polish the thing and make it look as beautiful and whatever arrangement you want. Well, that is all still there. And a lot of people think, oh, well, with WordPress or Drupal or Joomla, that's going to go away. No, it's not. That stuff is very important. In fact, the web applications program here at JCCC, that they are teaching about XHTML and CSS, all of that is still very relevant and very important. So I'm excited to show you some of these things as we go on today. I have set up, in anticipation of our session today, a website that you can log into, and I'm going to pull that up on the screen here for you real quick. And what are some questions you might have about what I just mentioned while the projector's pulling out? Just me, pretty much. And that's one of the advantages of poor economic times and low school, in terms of school funding. We had to. It used to be we used to have technology coaches that went around with the school district, and they could help teachers and staff do things with technology. And we had probably about 10 or 15 of those resources, and they all had to go back to the classroom because of the economic budget. So typically they would have helped. In fact, with the rollout that I'm now doing with this, as far as training, I'm training principals, I'm training the webmasters at each of the schools how to do and work in WordPress, but that would have typically been done by a technology coach. So believe it or not, it is pretty much just me for the development of the themes and things. Now the web server end, I have some very capable people that are working on those things, especially some of the database and inventory programs and things like that that are written for the school district. They work on those. Yeah.
How have you found how robust it is and whether it's hackable?
Oh, WordPress?
Yes.
That's a really good point, and that's another thing you do have to keep in mind. Sometimes security is a discussion, and it's not, as far as WordPress goes, it's no more hackable than anything else if you try to implement some of those common types of security things. Like, for instance, don't always go with the root, the common, whatever the admin login, with that username. Don't always go with that. Change that. There's also some great sites out there that tell you how to bulletproof WordPress. I think I found one the other day that said 14 ways to keep your WordPress site from being hacked. But that can, like I said, that can be true of some other things. That could have even been true of what we had happen when we were using some of that web authoring software, in the district. Yeah, David?
One of the things that I don't know if you're going to get into, but one of the things that I'm interested in learning, WordPress, obviously a content management system, is it's designed out of the box for blogging type of functionality.
That's a good question too.
Is how easy is it to utilize for other kinds of web applications?
Yeah.
And we're looking at we're building a bunch of websites right now, and WordPress very well may be a component of the website. And I was wondering if you might address having a website that's kind of got WordPress as part of it, and that it ties into a more conventional custom.
That is something you would want to consider, depending on the amount of data and the amount of. In fact, I'm going to go when I go through it, and you all are going to get to touch WordPress hopefully today, as long as everything goes right. But I've got a login for you. I've set up on I've got a multi-site at my own web domain there, rustymeigs.com, and if you look on the back or that sheet that I gave you, there it says down at the bottom, it says. Tonight's WordPress login, and it gives you the address to type in. So here's what I'm going to do, and I am going to address some of that, David, and remind me if I don't get to that, but I'm going to go through some of that. If you do me a favor, I just want you to count off one, numbers, numerical order, 1, 2, so Elizabeth, you'd be 2, and then
4, 5,
6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12.
great. Please remember your number, okay? So write that down. All right. A couple things you can do then on this when you look on the screen. If you logged in accidentally at the root directory, which is WordPress wp-admin, and you type that in just now, that new one I gave you, you will see up here, if you see where it says My Sites, and then you can go find your site. So like if I'm say I'm 20, and I go over to the dashboard, and we want the dashboard, by the way. That's what you want to start out with. So go to the dashboard of your site, and it should look something like this, okay? I think most of you have that. So we're going to take a stroll through this, and what essentially I've done, David mentioned, well, what's the difference between blogs? Well, and other content managers that are specifically designed for websites. And WordPress, if you know anything about the history of it, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. If you know the history of it, it is truly more a sophisticated blogging tool. WordPress has been about blogging more than it was about building websites. But they've always been building websites in WordPress, and people have always been doing it. Eventually, more recently, maybe in the last 1 or 2 years, they've gotten a lot better. In fact, WordPress, the WordPress community that has developed these, has updated them to make them more of a content manager, to have features that you might find in Joomla or Drupal or some of those other websites. Yeah.
Based on what you just said, why would you pick Joomla over WordPress or something like that?
Oh, right. Good example is our district website. Our district website is incredibly robust. In fact, we had a previous version of Joomla that we had back 3-4 years ago. That version we had all kinds of articles on there, you know, like thousands of articles. Every week they would write a new article, 2 or 3 articles. Well, that started to pile up after time. So Joomla was really very helpful for us as a district because it allowed us that robustness to be able to put all these articles and things like that in there. Now, WordPress has gotten better, but to get some of that, and here's the thing, and you'll see real quickly why we went with WordPress for our other websites in the district as opposed to Joomla, and that is because ease of use and being able to train people. For instance, I'm going to show you today how to get into your site and make sure you're on your particular number, but I'm going to show you how to get in there and change some things or mess with it and mess with some of the content. And as a result, it's much easier to train and much easier to cross-train as well. Joomla is a lot more sophisticated. It's a lot more complex.
Would it be capacity issues as well, like you said, thousands of articles versus WordPress?
Not necessarily. I mean, because here's the thing. You can have as much as you want in WordPress in terms of what they call them as posts. And so I would say that not necessarily. WordPress has done a lot of, they've compensated for a lot of that in terms of plugins. So in any of the plugins you build, for instance, there's file manager plugins out there for WordPress. There's all kinds of plugins that you can get it to seem a little bit more like Joomla or Drupal if you just had a real desire to, go with one over the other. But and that's the other thing. I'm not here to convince you that WordPress is your answer to, especially not to necessarily every business or any, what other needs you might have for it. But I am here to tell you what it's doing in our district and how it's, it's been very successful. And JCCC is certainly looking a lot in terms of curriculum at using WordPress for students and things like that. I personally like all three. I like Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress. It's just WordPress it really did start out as more of a blogging tool. So, but I'm going to show you, and maybe I can even show you some of those websites that I showed you at the beginning and how that's different. All right, if you'll do me a favor, go up to where it says your website number, and see I've made I didn't know how many were going to be here tonight, so I made a ton of these sites. But so if you would right click or control, I guess we don't have Macs in here, so I won't even say control click, but if you would right click on website or websig site 20 and then go to where it says, okay, so go down to where it says visit the site and then right click on that and say open in a new tab. And this is the way I like to use to be able to see the front end and also see the back end. And it's, it's, in a way, it's a very trivial way of dealing with this, but on the back end you can make your edits, your changes in WordPress, and then of course you can view them out on the site as soon as you do them, and you can see how that works. So even though I am, I had 34 elementary schools and we have 34 webmasters at each of those elementary schools, they used a web authoring tool to upload these websites in the past. Well, in a web authoring tool, you typically have a split view where you can see the code and you can also see the design view. So that's kind of what this is, but this is just the poor person's way of doing it, I call it. But basically, this would be, or the frugal person's way doing website management. So you've logged in on the dashboard as your back end, and you've also can take a look at the front end and just kind of scroll through there and look over your site. You'll see some things over here about recent posts, comments, archives, things like that. You'll also see out here it says, if you've ever, any of you programmers out there, the Hello World program is typically used in everything. Yeah, it's the one. So that's a Hello World post to kind of show you what that's all about. But let's go through and take a look at what all of this is. If you will, click on posts real quick. Just click on over in the dashboard. Now, remember when I say you go to the dashboard and click on something, that's this back end view or the admin panel. And go to posts, click on it, and you can see that Hello World right there, can't you? And so let's just, let's edit this to take a look and see what it has in it. And it even says right here, it just has a very simple bit of text that you have showing you that it's a post. You have some different things you can do with that post. You can give it categories. We're not going to give it categories in here for right now, but those are some things that I can show you down the road. If you have any questions after we get finished up, you can certainly let me know. But we have a thing, for instance, let's say I didn't want all of this information, like see where it says edit, delete it, or start blogging. Let's say I wanted to take that out. And so I'm just going to delete that. And then I go over here to the update button, and I just click on update. And then if I go out there to my design view, as it were, and hit refresh, you'll see that that's gone. So I've been able to edit that post very easily. Nothing fancy, and you may think that's really cool or maybe not, but the real power of this is when you have more content to edit. So, but let's create a post now. Why don't you go back to the dashboard view and click on add new under where it says all posts. Click on add new and let's add your own. So we'll just say web sig bless you, presentation. Tonight we are learning about WordPress. Now, one of the things that I do like about this, do you see this this toolbar up here that has some buttons? It doesn't have a ton of choices for you, but it does have a bold, italics. You can change from a paragraph format to a heading if you want to. For instance, if I wanted to say, tonight we're learning about WordPress, and I wanted to put that in a certain kind of heading, I could put it in a heading 1, except notice what it just did. Did the whole thing, didn't it? So you'll have to play with that some. There's a plugin, and we talked about plugins. Plugins are essentially programs. They can be JavaScript, they can be PHP, they can have all kinds of stuff in them, HTML, CSS. But they're basically programs that are written to allow you to make it more user-friendly. So for instance, see where I just highlighted, I just wanted that to be the heading 1, and it did the whole thing. So that's one of the drawbacks, but there is a program out there called the Tiny, and this is based on the Tiny MCE editor, if you've seen that before, and you can get more features with it, and you can style it a little bit more the way you want it. So that's not a huge issue, but there are some things you can do with this, like for instance, if you wanted to make it a certain color, if I wanted to make this in JCCC burgundy, I don't remember what the exact color is, but, and then if we hit publish, now notice it says publish this time instead of update, right? And now if you go back out here, will it show up? And we hope it will. And sure enough. And it looks like maybe a few others of you are on my root directory, but that's okay. Hey, and you know what? Don't worry about it. Tonight, after the little login issue, we're not going to worry about it. So it's fine. So, but you see, you can put posts up here fairly easily, and what this does is, this is on the main page. It allows you to organize some content. It allows you to put the information on. Like I went out, I can't remember where this user group was listed out online, but I did a Google search, and found it. And so you can list information in that way. Any questions about the posts or anything like that?
It's a good example of multiple people.
It is.
updating the site at the same time.
Absolutely. There's a term called, and I don't know about you, and we're doing this in the school district that I'm in, and it was kind of exciting because I got to help them and some of the other staff there at the district office. We got to go back to the school where I taught and help them set up a Convergent Journalism website. And a Convergent Journalism website, and like David, you just said, it is set up so that now they have WordPress is being utilized for their main site, but then say the soccer team wants a website and the coach wants to post some stuff on there, maybe even some articles, and have the team captain post some articles and things like that. Well, great, they can roll out a site for the soccer team. And with WordPress, and again, you can do this with other types of tools too, but what's cool about doing it with WordPress is those articles, like let's say the soccer captain writes a really great article about the championship soccer season, you know. Well, all of a sudden, those articles can propagate up into the main page of the website so that the webmaster, the person that used to be responsible for all that content, and it was I've done the high school websites for schools before, and it's almost a nightmare because you get some students that maybe can do a website, but then they graduate and they go on and then you're out of luck. Well, with the new system, they've got a certain theme, they've built that theme in WordPress, and then if the soccer team wants a website, the band wants a website, they can all manage their own content, important content, and it all moves up to the main site. It's called Convergent Journalism. And what's even greater about this is these articles, students can write an article and they can be sitting at the basketball game on their mobile device, writing an article, and they can hit submit, but it doesn't get published until the teacher or an administrator or a coach looks at it and approves it. And that's what's even better is we can look at, say, did the student follow conventions? And next thing you know, they hit publish and it's up there. And it's almost real time in some cases. So
How do they submit again?
they would just go into like this back end, like what we did, and they would be contributors. And there's different, of course, permissions that you can do in WordPress. They would just be a contributor. And so, for instance, they could log into this WordPress site, either do a post, and we'll get to a page in just a second, and I'll show you what that's like. But yeah, they could do that.
Mobile device, what do they need? Just pick up the page?
Yeah, really. There's some of the drag and drop features that you can do with a regular desktop that you can't do with the mobile device. But with a mobile device, you can just enable it so that it just has push buttons and things like that. So yeah, but yeah, they're doing it. They've been doing it for about a year now. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can this WordPress, be integrated with like SharePoint, those stuff, or not really?
Well, let me kind of. It can be integrated with a lot of things. That would be one option. There's honestly all kinds of possibilities, and that's where the plugins and things like that come in handy. Let me show you that one school website that I was going to tell you about, because let me show you. These are Outlook calendars on this website, and I'll just kind of give it to you here. Let's see. If you look at this website here, this section of upcoming events is from an Outlook calendar. So whoever, say one of the secretaries at the elementary school is managing that Outlook calendar, and they're typing in upcoming dates, and it's being pushed right out into, we're using an ICS calendar plugin to push it right into there. So they don't even have to think. They used to be the ones that had to do that with the old websites. They used to have to put all that in there. So yeah, with SharePoint, I don't know what exact connections you can make with SharePoint, but I'm sure there's something out there probably where people are doing it. Yeah, good question.
You kind of alluded to that there are different levels of contributors, or basically security and settings that come within WordPress. Is that something that is pretty hard and fast, or can you, as a developer, can you create different classes of users, different sorts of permissions?
You not only could, and that's where some people lean toward Drupal a little bit more because of the permissions, the granular permissions that are involved. the thing about Drupal, and I would love to use it for an intranet, especially for logins for all of our staff, because Drupal apparently has that granular permissions. That it's a little, and WordPress has something similar. It's not maybe quite in the same format, because like I said, it refers to a contributor. It's somebody who would write an article. Well, you can do that in Drupal, and you can also do that in Joomla. Now, the latest versions of Joomla, which we used to build our district website about a year ago, the latest version of Joomla, Joomla used to have a real issue with permissions. That's why a lot of people would choose Drupal over Joomla. Well, Joomla did get a lot better, because the latest version that we implemented, yeah, and I see you nodding, so you probably experienced that.
We maintain a client that's got Joomla.
Joomla, yeah. And I'll just tell you that I was leaning toward Drupal myself for building the main district website. Now, we stuck with Joomla mainly because one of the persons, the content manager who was using it, is well versed in it, and it really just made sense for us. But you know, yeah, those are some good questions. Now, again, you can, with plugins and things like that, you can get some of that functionality. But even Drupal, and I've even heard, I know of some agencies that are using Drupal, but they're saying that it's just not maybe as user friendly as something like WordPress. So, in other words, you know, but again, it's very robust, and so those are some things you want to think about.
Be a learning curve for those of you, I mean, unless you really specialize
Yeah.
in that, you know, and I've hired different people to do those.
Yeah.
You can't get someone that just kind of knows it.
Yeah, right. That's right. You really need to, yeah. Unlike Drupal, you mean, or?
Yeah, Drupal or Joomla.
Joomla, yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, especially when they redid, the superintendent said, "Hey, we want the website in 4 months from now," and I thought, well, and they just changed. I mean, they had just blown it to bits and rebuilt Joomla, and so I had no no resources are out there. It was pretty tricky. So that's maybe a headache I don't want to relive anytime soon. But again, you know, what is your purpose? And that's really I mean, Drupal may be the perfect instrument for your business. It depends on what your purpose is. But again, I think sometimes WordPress facilitates this. So let me show you now. So we saw where it says post. Click on categories. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if you click on categories, and we are using categories to do something else. For instance, a lot of school districts go out and they purchase somebody to develop their websites or maintain their websites for them. So they have a service that, for instance, like distributions, things that we would distribute. We used to distribute in hard paper copy in kids' backpacks and things like that. Well, we now, using that category feature I just showed you, we now have, and let me get to this here real quick. We now have a mechanism for doing that in this district that I told you about, and that is through this website. And these things you see here are all posts. But I was asked to create this as a result of, they wanted to stop all the paper distributions, you know, all the waste of paper that goes out in the kids' backpacks. When we could inform kids about these cool things and the activities electronically now, which so many more people seem to subscribe to. So we've done this with using WordPress and categories, the categories feature. And what's even better is they can subscribe RSS feeds, if you are familiar with that. Stands for really simple syndication. Those are news feeds. And news feeds, for something that changes, like these change, this cheerleading thing may be open for another month. And then once it's over, we want it off of there, right? So, but we can set it up so that if you're a parent, you can subscribe to this using an RSS feed, so it comes to your smartphone or your web browser or your email or whatever. So that's one way we are using categories. And so, for instance, if I just click on what's in non-for-profit community opportunities, I can see there's a bigger list, isn't there? So, so you can look. You can also list all. But there's all kinds of ways. I can subscribe to any of these things. If I've got a kid that is really big into cheerleading, I can go into athletics or dance and cheer and in-district opportunities, and I can look and I can see all the opportunities that my kid might have an opportunity. And I can subscribe to them and get notifications using those RSS feeds. So That's a pretty cool thing. But that is this feature that I'm showing you right here called categories. And you can make up all kinds of categories and then have people subscribe to them. So that's one thing I like about that. You can also do that with any, like I said, any of the other content managers as well. But this, I do like the way that WordPress delivers it. So that's one of the things I wanted to show you under post. Now post, and here's what I'm going to show you the difference. If we go out to this website here, this might be something, and notice we've just got some lorem ipsum text or dummy text, right, to fill this page out. And but if we wanted to, we could put, for instance, in the spotlight, students participated in a green project for the community and the environment, and we could put that up there. In WordPress, here's the way that if you're going to build a website in WordPress, the best way to do it is this. Anything that's a news feed or anything that's something that's going to change on a lot, on a regular basis, use posts. Use your posts to do that. Those again are similar to other content managers, but posts, which has been used for the blogging feature of WordPress for so long, posts is the way to do that. Now, if you have static content, there's some things that don't change. Like this school, there's one thing that's not going to change at this school is maybe the About Us page, and I don't know whether they have anything there or not. They do. They do. So this is static content. So this is where I would make a page. So I would never really use posts to create this static content. I would use a post, or a post for news feeds, but not for this. I'd definitely use a page. So those are some things when we look at this back end that we're going to talk about. Now, we'll talk about media in just a second, but let's just go ahead and create a page. So I want you to go down to Pages on the dashboard. We want to make this as much hands-on as we can. And click on Pages, or now the newer versions of WordPress, something I don't like is it's a little bit redundant, the menus. For instance, you look up here in Media, and then it's got Library, Add New. And then you can also add new up here. You can also, there's all kinds of places you can add new. So you that's one thing I'm not as big a fan. You can, this admin panel that you back here, this is also customizable. You can make your own admin panel. So like if I didn't want, and eventually we just don't have time. We're rolling out 36 to be accurate, 36 elementary websites in this school district I told you about. And you know what? It's going to take, we're doing good to get that out with such a small staff that we have. So for instance, but at a later date, I might want to say links. I really don't want my webmasters at each of the schools to even worry about links. So I could maybe from this back end, I could take this off. But if you click on Pages and you click on Add New, so just click on Pages and Add New, or if you clicked on Pages, you saw that sample page. Let's just create a page, but go out here, click another tab on your web browser, and go out to a place called Lipsome.com. So I'm just going to type in Lipsome.com, and it has that false text or non-intelligible text that I told you about. And this is a great way when you're building your websites, if you decide to use WordPress, this is a great way to use filler. And so for instance, I decided I want to generate, and you can see it's all in Latin. If you're good at reading Latin, some of that might make sense to you, but, and then again, I don't know. But if you type in, let's just choose Paragraphs Radio button at Lipsome.com. Choose the Paragraphs Radio button and then type in 10. And then over here where it says Generate Lorem Ipsum Text, and then just highlight it. And it looks kind of odd when you highlight it, but it'll work. Sometimes it depends on the browser. It looks like it highlights it with spaces, but you'll be okay. And then go back to your control panel and I'm just going to say, you make a page with your name in it, because some of you we're all making pages here. So I'm just going to call this Meigs sample page, and you call whatever your page you want, and put your name with it. And then if I go down here in the editor in WordPress, and this is for a page, looks very similar to what was for a post, and hit paste, you can see there's my lorem ipsum text. It even recognizes that it's in paragraphs. And I don't need this part, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to make some edits here. And then notice up here, some of you really like HTML. And you know, I was kind of scared, like I said, when that student came up to me, I thought, wow, how is this going to change? This was a new paradigm for me, and I was quite uncertain how it was going to affect what I did with HTML and what I knew about CSS or style sheets. But for those of you who are a little bit more code inclined, it's all still there, and you can still do some things with HTML, and you can look and see that it's there. But I'm just going to go back to the visual for a little while, but it is possible if you want to do that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to choose is, I'm just going to leave this at the default template. Now, I have built in the themes for these elementary schools that we're getting ready to roll out those sites, I have built specific themes and pages or template pages for those. That's very much like some of the web authoring tools you've maybe used. And then go ahead and click on Publish. And now you have your page, and you say, great, well, maybe I want to view that page. So you could click on it like this, and it'll show you kind of how it's going to look. Did a pretty good job, didn't it? Didn't do too bad. Now, if you get really picky with your font sizes and you want something really different, it might not do so good. And oh, by the way, why do we have leave a reply? What if I don't want anybody to reply to this page? This is just a static page. I don't want people getting on there replying. So what I could do is I can go back to the bottom of this page, and usually it'll say, oh, no, actually it's not. That's in settings. I'll worry about that later. But settings, you can go into settings and you can change that so that those comments, it won't allow people to just comment on some static page. You know, if somebody gets on there and they're just being silly and they write some stuff you don't want. So that might be why you want to disable that later. So now where is this page though? And we want to take a look and see if, is it out there on your site? If you go out to your site and you hit refresh, is this page available? Well, sure enough, it is available here on the menu. And I'm going to show you the newest versions of WordPress, and this was about the last 2 years, and this is what I really loved. If you know anything about, they're called Spry or CSS menus. It used to be, back in the day, if you really wanted an elegant menu, you had to use something like Flash to create a really nice hover over menu and a pull-out menu and things like that. But later on, many developers started using CSS to make pure style sheet menus. In fact, that website, the elementary school that I showed you, this was, and they're actually called Son of Suckerfish and Suckerfish menus because of the way they expand. It's kind of an interesting name for them, but that's what it is out on the web, and it shows how they expand, and you can look at different things. You can have them hierarchical. You can have as many levels as you want. You don't usually want to, when you're building a website, and I think most of you probably know this, or at least have some familiarity with it, but if you've got a website that is 5 or 6 levels deep, you probably start falling asleep at that point, right? Or you stop noticing that you don't even care about looking at the website and what all they have on it. So you usually want to keep your menus 2 or 3 levels deep. Like this one's just 2 levels deep. And so that, you know, it works pretty decent. But again, there's this WordPress system is now, the latest versions have a menu. Basically, it's almost like a widget, but it's a drag and drop menu editor. And I'll just kind of show you real quick here. So if you all go to, and we'll see what it looks like on these, since this is I believe it's the 2012 or 2011 theme that I'm using. But if you go to menus, you will now see, and this is kind of nice, you can actually create menus. You can custom create menus. So I could have as many menus for multiple web pages as I want. What's really cool about it is, and I'll just show you the drag and drop features to get those 3 levels, or 2 or 3 levels that you might want. And you can take a look at this if you want. If you go there under menus, do you see yours, the one that you created? I see mine. There's Meigs sample page. I can also create a custom link. But first off, I got to create a menu, and that's, I'm just going to I call all mine main. So I just type in main over where it says menu name, and I hit enter. And then I see there's nothing there right now, but here's what's really cool about this. I can create one. Let's just create a custom link. I'm just going to create this, make it to Google, our favorite search engine. I don't know, maybe for some. And then label, just type in Google like you would want it to grammatically be spelled with a capital G possibly. Hit add to menu, and it adds it to the menu. Also, do you see where those pages are? If I click view all, because some of them disappeared on me, but I click on view all, and what did I do? I'm missing some, aren't I? Oh, that's what I did. I collapsed it when I should have. Okay, you see where it says Meigs sample page? I'm just going to click on the checkbox behind this one, and I'm going to click add to menu. And this is I've been working with this feature for about 2 years since it came out with the newest WordPress versions, to use drag and drop menus. And I can tell you, our webmasters now, because here's the first thing is our webmasters at each of the schools, they only work part-time, maybe half a work week, 40-hour week. They don't have a lot of time, and they're also resetting passwords for teachers and staff and things like that. And then on top of that, they're working the computer labs. But see this? This makes it almost not, they don't even have to think when they do this. They barely have to think. And here's why. Because over here, if I want to say I want Google to be here, but I want Meigs sample page up on top, I can just drag and drop it. What if I also want this sample page to be a subset or a second level menu of Meigs sample page? And look what happens there. I click on that, and now I've moved it over, I've indented it by dragging it over a little bit. I hit save menu, and then I now have that menu available. So this is becoming a it's making all 36 of our elementary staff that work with these websites, it makes it so easy for them to create a page, about us page, right? That static content that we talked about. So they create a page, and then next thing you know, they go into the menus, they click add to menu button, and then they drag and drop, hit save, and it's ready to go. And that's how the person that recently, the webmaster at this elementary school, she did all of that by what we taught her about that drag and drop menu system. And it only took us about an hour or less to show her how to do this. In the old site, at the old site, it took, here's all your menus. They can only be one level. And we have some other menus here. It's kind of difficult to navigate this site. And so, but and not only were they having to make sure all of these things were in the right place, but then they also had to upload everything and then download everything and change things and then upload it again and back and forth and back and forth. So this has eliminated the need for us to do that. We can add content very quickly by going over here and making a page, right? Making a web page. And then we can go down here to an appearance and menus, and pretty soon we can start dragging and dropping. But that makes life a lot easier for us. And again, in schools where money is tight and it doesn't seem to be getting better yet, this is huge for us. So, what questions do you have about what I've just showed you? That's the thing. Now see, I have developed this site so that it shows up that it's built in. So, but as far as if you clicked on what's your primary menu, you can go up here to where it says theme locations and say main and hit save. And I'm not sure about the 2011 theme, which is a WordPress theme. This is a theme that comes with, but I haven't seen how it does yet. So it may or may not do that second level menu like I need it. But you can always build that or have your developers build it. There it is though, sure enough. So see? Good question, Cheryl. So see, you can make this as detailed and you can make it quickly. That's the big deal. Just to give you an example, I'll show you another site that we created in WordPress. This website used to take me, this is on your sheet too if you want to, if you ever, after you leave this session and you want to go home and you want to take a look at some of these sites, you can certainly do so. And this is the new site. The old site that we used to have was about 10 years old, at 10 or 11 years old. And I said it probably had a shelf life of 3 years. so we went and limped along for about 7 years there, basically. And I used to get calls, they'd say, hey, can you update this? Can you update that? And I would go in there and I would make these updates. It would take me sometimes, because I wasn't familiar with the person who had created it before, and they had things everywhere. And I'm not saying that was good or bad. Maybe they were just learning. Maybe it was the way it was back then, but it took me 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes to make updates. If I did that over 4 or 5 times a month, I was easily running into about 20 hours every month, or maybe 30 hours every month making updates on this site. And when we launched this website, this is in WordPress, and I gave the person who manages this, I gave him an hour and a half training. I sat him, at the driver's seat, kind of like what you all are doing, and said, we walked through it and said, here's how you do this, that, and the other thing. And pretty soon, he asked me a couple questions later down the road, here and there, maybe 10 minutes, he'd ask me a question or two. But ultimately, I probably spent, in the last 5 months, we launched it 2 or 3 months ago. I think it's been about 3 months. But the site was up and able to be managed by this person in the HR department for about 5 or 6 months ago. And in that amount of time, I probably spent less than 4 or 5 hours. That, what used to take me for one update because of the craziness of the chaotic structure of this website, and now this, I get no questions. Last 2 or 3 months, I've gotten 0. There aren't any. They can manage this. And so that's why, for that, WordPress is great. And since it's a user-friendly environment, and we can make it very, and I can create a lot of the themes to make them very user-friendly. And like those menus, those drag and drop menus. Like Cheryl asked about that. The drag and drop menus, where do they show up? And you got to go over here into the theme locator and put that. Basically, I just set up the theme for them, and then all they had.
Built the theme first and all the different stuff.
I built the themes first, and then, but they still would have had to go in and activate that menu. But I went ahead and I just set it all up for them so that they.
Can you also not have that show as a menu item if you just wanted it to be a link somewhere?
Absolutely, yeah. You can. Well, here's the cool thing. Now, this is a thing. This image slider that you see here. This is a plugin, and that's why, here's one thing to keep in note. This is a really good, this is a nugget of wisdom, and it's something I learned as I went through this, and as I've spent the last 2 or 3 years really devoting myself to WordPress and the school district. But that is, if you are going to go with WordPress, something like WordPress, look at plugins. Plugins can do great things. That image scroller is a plugin, okay? It works on Drupal, it works on Joomla. This one works on, it's called the Nevo slider. But this plugin is out there, but if you're going to do something like this, look for plugins that have a history. In other words, look for every time they update a version of WordPress, and they do a lot of times for those security risks that we talked about. In fact, that's one way you can keep your WordPress site secure, is updating it when, because new security patches come out and things like that. But the thing is, those plugins, if you look at the plugin, and it's a plugin that just somebody out there wrote, but they, it's probably not got a good history in terms of it's not being updated on a regular basis. When the new new update of WordPress comes out, those plugins break. So that's why we just don't even mess with the plugins that we know aren't going to work very well. We really search for plugins that have a history, and that somebody's a developer out there and they're doing and this one is one of them. Now you can pay for this one. You can pay for a fancier version of this, but the very basic version is free. So, which is another nice thing. Yeah.
I think you brought up a really good point. I have actually 2 comments. One question and a comment. Open source. One of the great things about open source is you've got a lot of different people working on it, but you also have the possibility that the person who's behind a particular thing, in this case we were talking about plugins,
Yeah.
may
stop doing it.
May stop doing it.
Yeah.
And in which case, that component of code may become obsolete. And so if it's integral to your site, you may have, there's a certain risk there. not
Exactly.
how
Yep.
successful is the same as
Modules for Drupal, modules for Joomla,
right, all
plugins for, yeah,
kind of open
and
source
it
stuff.
really is. It's true of
And-
all of them.
And that's true, that's true at all levels. There's open source for basically all the back end stuff on
Yeah.
web servers and things like that. And if you look at the history of open source, they always branch off. A lot of that has to do with things like this, where someone
Yeah.
else decides to take over and they diverge. But so you do want to stay on a path that's well traveled.
Yeah.
Or you're probably going to be in trouble. My second question.
Yeah.
Or my question actually, it's sort of a side thing. Let's say we want to try to use WordPress for something.
Mhm.
And we can give you an example here. We have just in January finally started. We have our own server now,
Uh-huh.
and we're taking care of about 10 websites potentially on the server. And what is involved in setting up WordPress on your server? How difficult is that? Just a matter of copying the WordPress kernels to the right place, or is there more to it?
There's not a lot to it, except for the fact, again, each server is different. We use Ubuntu, others use other servers, whether it's, but whatever you do, you just gotta, once you set up your PHP and your MySQL servers, pretty well it is just a matter of taking those and putting them in the right place. Now, with that being said, though, what I just created for you tonight, which was hoping would work a little bit better on the user logins, but even so, I set up on my own website out there, who I have through a hosting company, I set up a multi-site. So that means, that's why we've got all these, I've got WordPress / WebSig01, WebSig, those are all multiple sites. So for instance, your multiple sites, you can have as part of a multi-site. That's where you'd want to enable the multi-site capabilities.
But in that case, technically, I'm just guessing here from what you're saying, because I know nothing about this.
Uh-huh.
WordPress has internal to it a capability of essentially managing multiple sites within effectively one WordPress installation.
That would be correct for the most part. There's some other little things in there that, I
Because the reason I ask is when you're dealing with multiple sites on a server,
uh-huh.
You may be setting up separate IP addresses for each site.
Right.
In which case I would assume you'd have to have a separate WordPress.
Not necessarily.
Unless the site was strictly was 100% WordPress, in which case you could then use this multi-site capability.
Yeah. Well, mod rewrites, all those. There's a lot of different things you could do to, to get it to pull up all those different sites and the way you categorize them and all that stuff. The multi-site, I like the feature of that though, because you see WordPress is the base site, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have the multi-sites are the ones that I've created for each of you tonight. So those are based on that main instance.
But they're basically all on the path tree.
Right.
They're out on the path tree.
Right.
And you can set up separate plugins for each node on the tree.
Yeah, that is correct. Mm-hmm.
That's handled in WordPress.
Although I didn't do it very successfully tonight.
Right.
So
But that's handled in WordPress itself?
that's handled in the WordPress. Although, well, I take that back. It's handled somewhat in WordPress, but then, for the most part, yes, the administration of that. And I don't want to get too deep here, but for instance, like LDAP, you can set up your address, your logins, your address network of logins. You can set it up so that they can connect. And see, things like Moodle are that way too. You can do that with Moodle, and you can do that with Joomla and Drupal and all those things. But that would probably be a little more detailed, but those are good questions, David, and I'll be happy to try to answer them a little more carefully after the class, but you can certainly.
I'm slightly confused because I don't know a lot about it. It's not just, the WordPress goes on the server side, not just on the client side? It's just a front side thing and all the other programs and.
Well, it's all on the server side because here's a good example. If you've some of these classes that you all have taken here at JCCC, for instance, where you upload you upload your files to the website, right? You have a public underscore HTML out there. Well, essentially in that htdocs folder, and in fact, when I set it up on my Mac, when I set up I build all these sites. First off, I use a web authoring tool to build all these websites that you see right now. So I didn't just build those in WordPress. I actually used a web authoring tool. And that's one thing I was going to talk about. Camilo had that question, and we were discussing it a little bit. But I would use a web authoring program to build this site at first, and then I dismantle the HTML and the CSS, and I put it in the WordPress structure, which is setting on the server. Because otherwise, if it's PHP, if it's not, it's server-side scripting we're talking about, and MySQL. So none of it's really client-side. The only thing that makes it seem client-side is this admin panel, which you can log into. So that, does that make sense? Or
But you're logging into it, but it's sitting on the server.
you're logging into it, but it's sitting on the server. Absolutely. You got it. Good
You're basically doing your
description there.
using a web front-end tool to the server. And you're
I guess I always thought it was,
on the server.
I just didn't know.
Well, let me show you. You all can look at it. I'll show it to you right now. At least I think it's set up for this. Yeah. If we go into appearance, ooh, no, I take that back. Do you have one? Does anyone have one that says edit or editor? I'm not seeing it on there. Okay. But typically, there's a place you can edit the HTML code and the style sheets, even though it's still sitting on the server, Cheryl. But there's a place in WordPress that allows you to do that. Now, you can imagine, and here's the reason we aren't seeing it right now, it's a security issue. So, but when I'm building on my own computer, and I'll just take the WordPress files, which is a bunch of PHP files, I set up my own personal server, I drop them in the htdocs folder, I connect it with the MySQL database, and bada boom, bada bing. I've got a WordPress instance, and I can start building. And I can even get into the editing after I've built it using a web authoring tool. I've dismantled it. I've put it together. You know, the way WordPress uses hooks and the loop, which is all that data, the way that data is being generated. And I build the HTML that I've created with this certain design in mind, and the CSS, I build it all around it. And you can do that from even this admin panel, but again, it's a security issue. But I typically build it on my own server before I ever upload that theme, which is really cool because then you can upload the theme, which is just a folder that holds all those pertinent files. And that's what you're seeing. This is exactly what I did with this website right here. I built it on my own WordPress instance, on my own personal web server, on my own personal computer. I took it from that web authoring tool, I built it, then I dismantled the HTML and the CSS that goes along with this. All of that belonged in one nice, neat little folder called Ravenwood Theme. I picked that theme up, I uploaded it to the server, and now, next thing you know, I was off and running. And I had this nice, neat look. Of course, some of the content, of course, you have to put it in the content, but now they're off and running.
You use pretty much the same thing for all these sites except for the colors and stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much yeah. There's a kind of a consistent look. We wanted that with the branding, but this one was the one that I was the most creative on, because, for instance, the main district sites and things like that, and I would encourage you to do this just because, again, resources being what it is in the school district. We had a graphic designer create a look. And then, then the trick was making that, and not all of it worked. You know, you would look and you go, "That's not going to work," you know, and you pull it out of a design file, but then you have to assemble it in the web part. So that was, I tried to get those as close to the graphic designer's concept, and that's a real good way of doing it. If you have a graphic designer in your company and you have them do this part of it, then you can concentrate on making it live on the web. Then the next step was, you know, automating it, because with the web authoring tool, I could still make the website, but boy, it's so much better to have it in a content manager. But that's kind of the process I would use, is, you know, graphic designer. Like I said, the latest one I was the most proud of, because I got to kind of make it, I made it a lot more my own while still branding with the district's theme, you know, yeah.
Sorry to ask, but how many different configurations? I mean, you know, obviously in a normal just website that you're writing in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP level,
Yeah.
How they flow around. How flexible or how constrained is WordPress?
The only constraints, you sometimes have to override some of the styles that are inherent with WordPress. So in other words, there's, for instance, there are things in WordPress like, for instance, bullets. The list, unordered lists and bullets, they are used almost in everything, like especially widgets. You'll see you'll pull a widget over, and we'll get to that. Actually, that's a good segue to this next part. Let's go take a look at some widgets, but sometimes it'll show up with a bullet, and you have to go into your style sheet and you have to override that. So you just have, those are some things, yeah, you do have to keep those in mind. That's great segue to this next one. Let's go to, so far, just a recap, we've done posts, which we said is really good for headlines, news. You can work with RSS feeds. We've done pages, which is, of course, for static content. I would recommend you use it for static content. And then we've also talked a little bit about menus so that we can link to those pages. And also, we're going to get to widgets real quick, but let's do this before we get to widgets. Let's go out here to media. And as always, and this is a disclaimer, but it's, especially working in a school system, I've always found this to be something you have to be cognizant about, and that is always make sure you're not putting something up there that's not copyright permissible. For instance, these pictures that you see here are all, we follow very strict guidelines for getting these pictures up. If students, if the parent says, I don't want my kid's photo being taken, a picture of my kid, and they have very good, a lot of good reasons for not doing that, we have to use something called photo exclusions, and we have to be careful when we take pictures of students. So we are very, very careful about that, but the same goes for copyrighted material, and I think you understand that. I think we're hearing a lot more about copyrighted materials, but the media library is where you would put some things like pictures. So for instance, if I was taking this, let me see if I can, I was going to see if I could view one of these. I'm not going to do it right now, but if I wanted to put a picture up here, all I would have to do is go into the media, and I go to add new, and I can browse the hard drive or jump drive or whatever, network drive, whatever you have, I can browse for it. And for instance, here's if I were looking for some images, and since there's not going to be necessarily anything on this computer, but I would go find some images wherever they might be, and let's say some of these. I'll just take, say I want to see what this is like to open this up. Let me show you what you can do though with WordPress that's kind of nice, is you can control click. If I want this one, I want just this one, and I want this one. These sample pictures that are in my pictures library here on our own default on the computer here. Now, I'm going to take these off as soon as I put them up there, but I'm just kind of showing you how it would work. But I can control click, and actually it's not letting me, is it though? Is yours not letting you either? Interesting. Hold on one second. Let me see if it's this one. Here we go. Okay, here's what I did. If you try this, go click on the one that says switch to browser uploader or something like that. And if you click on that, it'll let you control click and multiple click. I'll go back to it real quick here. Hold on just 1 second. So if I go back to, it was this one here. This one was only allowing me to click on one at a time. So I clicked on this where it says switch to the new uploader. And then I go to select files, go to the sample pictures that are provided for me. And I'm going to say the chrysanthemum, the jellyfish, and the penguins. And those are the only ones I want. I control clicked them. I hit open. And watch what it does. It does all of them individually. No more of the zipped files that you used to get. How many of you are familiar with uploading a whole bunch of files and you get a zip format by doing that? But with this, they uploaded, each of them uploaded individually. The other thing that you can see when you get into the media is, and again, what you mentioned about Joomla and Drupal, what we've talked about them being a little more robust, they do handle images, you can put more folders and do things like that. But for the kinds of things we want our staff to be able to put these pictures up and things like that, we want to make it easy. And this, quite honestly, is incredibly easy to be able to do. So if I wanted to insert it, if I wanted to look at some of the details of this picture, I can see the address. It has a thing called a permalink, which is the absolute address where you can link to wherever you put that picture. So you could, but you can also, for instance, in my page, like if I go over here to Pages, and I go to my sample page, and I click on the, I'll just put my cursor there, and then I'm going to say Upload Insert. Go up to my media library, and there's what I just uploaded, right? And so I can click on Show. I can click on some of these. You have to have the styles usually set up correctly, but I'm just going to say, I'm going to use the medium, and I'm going to insert it into my post, and now there it is. So it's very much like a word processor, the way of inserting an image into a word process document. So that's kind of nice. So, and like I said, I'm just going to take these down, but also I can select all of them. If I want to get rid of them, I'm going to say delete it permanently, and I'm going to say apply all. Great. And now let's go to widgets. Let's take a look at widgets, and I think that's pretty well where we're going to finish up. We might talk a little bit about settings, but then widgets is where we're going to wrap it up. Widgets, typically the WordPress themes, you can build your sidebars. Now in Drupal, it's usually, I think it's called blocks or modules or something. And I keep mentioning because I know you know a little bit more about Drupal, don't you?
No, yeah.
So, but the sidebar, what I do and what we've done specifically, this sidebar here, you can put a lot of different things in that sidebar. But what's great about it is I can make sidebars anywhere I want. And I can, and if I don't want them all named sidebars, because you remember that scrolling marquee where it shows the pictures and it goes right through? That's essentially a sidebar. But what I call it something different. I call it a marquee, image marquee or something like that. And I set up a place instead of a sidebar where I can drop that image marquee or any other content I want for that matter. And then I put it out on the web page wherever I want it. And so so let's take a look at the widgets. Widgets are kind of cool because you've probably heard about widgets, especially with all the mobile devices. If you look at the iPads or the Droid tablets and things like that, a lot of them have widgets and things you can pull up. But look at what you can do here. If you look at your main page, this is the site, right? Look at all of this stuff over here. Recent post, recent comment, archive, blah, blah, blah. I want to get rid of some of this. So I'm just going to say, and although I'm not sure, is that on the right sidebar? I might be showcase sidebar. No? Oh yeah, you know what? Okay, the showcase sidebar I think is the page that we're on. Open up the showcase sidebar and just go grab a thing called a text widget over here, and you can even drag it. This is what a lot of people like. They like the drag and drop functionality. Oh, go back to widgets. So under appearance, yeah, that's all right. Go to widgets, and then on the left-hand side, you'll see available widgets, and you'll even see some that say inactive widgets. So if you're working on one, that you can drag it down there temporarily. But we're going to go look for the text widget and drag it up to the showcase sidebar. And you see where it says the sidebar for the optional showcase template. Although I'm not sure, well, we'll try it anyway. But you can type in, if we wanted to take some of that lorem ipsum text, I don't know, do we still have that copied? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, there's some of that lorem ipsum text. And then I'm just going to put false text. And it's okay if this is not the right widget or sidebar to drag it in. We'll fix it here in a second. But if I hit save, I'm just going to see. I don't know that it is. But is that not in this one that we're using? Yeah, I'm not seeing it here. So it must be one of these others. Let's see here. I'm trying to think what that. Well, go to your. No. Let's do that. That's a good idea. Great. So just all you have to do is expand footer area 1. But see, that's what makes it so nice about widgets. Even though I wasn't sure where it was, and you helped me, I can collapse this thing and I can drag it right down here to footer area 1.
And it's an auto-save, but you know, there's no save.
That's the cool, yeah, you're right, you noticed that, very good. Yeah, this one auto saves it for you, so, and then way down at the bottom, oh, I'm still not seeing it, I'm on. Yeah, let's see here.
So then the showcase sidebar is probably not in the template, is that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You have to decide, like when I build these pages, I wish I could show you just on the pages that I've already built for the district, because that's a little bit easier. But essentially, yeah, you can set up a sidebar. I'll just show you here. This website here, this is a sidebar where this menu is.
Yeah.
I've got a side, this is one, and this is one. So I've got a bunch of sidebars, even this is one. So it's kind of you have to decide where you want to put them. I've got a little sidebar under here that if you want to put an image under there, like one of these schools is a Blue Ribbon School, so if I want to put the logo for Blue Ribbon Schools, I could put it right there. But if I wanted a different something on the back pages, when I go to one of the back pages, like the About Us page, you can put a different logo. You know, you can put something different that you want them to see. So it really depends on whatever template. I've made 2 templates for this one. I've made a homepage template. Yeah, exactly. I've made a homepage template and I've made a content page template. And that's how I decide which sidebars to bring in. So, and that explains why I'm having some trouble there. So on that one, let me try one more time up here. Let me see if I can drag this up. Just one more, come on. It'd be nice if it worked. Did it on this one? Hold on here, I'm going to click back on the home page there. There we go, yeah, so see there? So now what happened, and here's a question, boy, that's a little excessive, is it not? Now, there's the other items I have, and if you go out there, I can get rid of those. I don't want all these others. I don't want recent posts, because I really want that big long string of text on my page. So I'm just going to get rid of this recent comments, archives. Now, if I get rid of these, am I out of luck, or can I get them back? They're widgets. So yeah, in most cases, I can get them back. And if it was something where it was text, you know, a specific kind of text, then I could just drag it down into inactive widgets, and I could use it later. So that way the content doesn't. Now, we could spend all day on this, but do you see some of the possibilities with widgets and making your page just content and populate content out there immediately? All right, the last thing I want to go through, because we are kind of getting, and then I want to ask any other questions you might have. Just the last thing is go back to the dashboard, and that's this over here, and click on Settings, and go to General. And General is where you can specify your site title. Now, on this website, I made this using a photo editor, okay? So I made this very specific because I wanted a certain color and text and all that. I'm not going to get that on where it's generating it out. But for a very quick website, if I'm not so worried about whether I have a graphically designed banner, I can create, mine says Web SIG Site 20. So I could say Meigs SIG website. And then I could change this tagline to tonight, 3/13/12. And so now some of the rest of this, I'm not going to pay too much attention to. You can look at that and see what that offers, but obviously you can customize a few things there. Now I also want to go, so if I go back here and scroll all the way up there, oh my gosh. And hit refresh, by the way, and you'll see where those widgets are not any longer down there except for the meta. And then I go to see where it says my website, doesn't it? And it says a little tagline too. So for a fairly, you know, if you're trying to get something up quick, a WordPress website can be created pretty quick. And you can use a theme like this 2011, or I think it's the 2011 theme that comes with it. Now, the next thing, a couple other things in general settings, writing. Well, what would maybe writing have to do? Well, convert emoticons, size of the post box, so how many lines do you want in the post box, default post category, things like that. Those are some settings, and I'm just going through this real quickly so you can kind of see it. If I wanted the home page to be my Google page, or not my Google page, it wouldn't be that, but let's say I wanted to be my Meigs sample page, maybe that's my home page now. I could set it as my home page in the reading. That's in the reading area. And I hit Save Changes, and then when I click on the home page, it shows my sample page. So that's my home page now. So you can set that up very quickly. Another thing you can do, last but not least, this is probably the last one I would mess with if any of you were to work with this. Let's say I don't want people to, see where it says anyone can post a comment? I don't want that. I don't want anybody to post a comment. A comment is held. Let's see, attempt to notify, link, allow people. See where it says allow people to post comments? Say no on that if you don't want somebody to do that. So you can go in here and you can set up some things so that they can't just comment on things. But you can also set it up so that they have to wait moderation. So if somebody gets on there and they're being silly and they say something silly on your website to mess up, you know, on a response to something on a cool blog you've got set up, you know, you can just say await it, to have it be await approval, you know, an administrator's approval. And by doing that, then you can keep, somebody might make that silly comment, but you can just go and delete it, but you don't have to approve it. So that is really all about that's the nuts and bolts of WordPress plugins. I said you can always go here and you can read some of these. You can basically what David said, where you download those off of a server, or, you know, well, you can go out to, well, let's just say here, go out to, I'm just going to do WordPress plugins. And now I can go out here and I can look through all the different, they've got tons of plugins that people are writing. Like I said, it's always good to look for a history. But the tiny MCE editor that gives you a few more options in those, how you edit your pages, your posts. I just am searching for it. Look, there it is. There's some different versions of it. Ultimate, Tiny MCE. This is the one we're using in the district. Tiny MCE Advanced. You click on it and you can download it. You download it in it's a set of files, okay? PHP, JavaScript, CSS, all that stuff. It's a set of files. You download it in a folder. You put it in the plugins area in your WordPress setup, your configuration, like what David was saying out there on the htdocs, and you upload it, and pretty soon you've got access to that plugin. And you can do some really cool things with plugins. But again, I would always encourage you to look at history on plugins. But this is something, you know, it's not too difficult to do. Now, writing the plugin is another issue because then you're talking about doing some stuff in PHP and all that stuff. But